So hi, I'm Deb Lacusta, and I'm going to be moderating our small panel today. And we're talking about directors directing actors. That's our main focus. This is my husband and writing partner and co-director on The Long Isolation, Dan Castellaneta.
Hello?
And this is Lionel Coleman. And tell us the name of your film and a little bit about it.
My short film is called These Final Hours, and it follows Curtis Grimes basically throughout a day in his life. The film ends with sort of, as the writer calls it, divergent realities.
Mm.
And I think it leaves you to kind of wonder what the real reality is. But what we loved about the film is that it's timely, it's now, it has everything to do with perceptions, especially the perceptions of the Black African American male in this country. So it has a great ending, and it features a guy named Joseph David Jones, who's also one of the stars of a CW television show called 4400, the 4400. So,
That's great. Wow.
and
Um,
now about your film.
Yes, so we'll tell you a little bit about our. So we have a film called The Long Isolation, which is a black and white feature length film, and it is as we call it a Zoom noir. We made it during the pandemic when it was really bad and there were no vaccines yet. We wrote the script for our. We have an improv writers group that we work with. A lot of them are Second City and Groundlings people, Spollen players, and they're all writers and improvisers and very funny people. So we actually wrote. We'll talk about casting in a little bit, but we actually wrote the parts for them because we know what they can do, what their strengths are, and it's makes it so much easier to write for someone when you know their voice. So it was easy to kind of figure that out. Um, we wrote it, and then we. So it's about it. Dan, you can tell what it's
Yeah,
about. A
I mean, it's
detective.
basically a parody of one, the old time a detective or crime movies from the 1950s and or the 40s and 50s, like that we call the film noir. And I had been reading a lot of Dashiell Hammett and some Ross McDonald and Raymond Chandler, and I thought of a to shoot on Zoom and make it look like a film since we're all separated.
Mhm.
I thought of the film Lady in the Lake, where everything was shot from the point of view of the detective. So I thought, well, if we have the voice of the detective, we don't have to have him there, but he could be talking to each individual people in the frame, whether they're the witness or a suspect or just other people that he would interview. And so that's basically, and it turned out to be kind of it seemed to work. We were able to tell a story that way.
So we sent everybody Zoom screens, costume pieces, fedoras,
Yeah,
wigs,
green
whatever they
screen. Yeah,
needed.
and we got all the black and white photographs from that era. A lot of it from the Los Angeles Library has a database of usable black and white photos that you can download.
It's pretty amazing.
It's
They have
from that
a
era,
huge
like
archive.
yeah,
Yeah.
huge archive.
Very
So
nice.
Yeah,
yeah, so we worked with a young editor from UCSB, a recent graduate, and she's the computer whiz and kind of put everything
put
together.
put the
Yeah,
backgrounds with the actors and other little things that like
yeah.
special effects and stuff.
Oh,
So
very nice.
yeah,
Very
so it
nice.
was a very fun project to do. So let's talk about your actor. How did you did you know your actor personally? Did you write it for him, or did you write it first?
No, I'm not as talented as you guys are. I'm not a writer. The project fell in my lap from an actor who I had cast in a television show that I had just finished directing called NCIS New Orleans. And he said, not sure if you'd be into doing a short film or not. Um, these guys are specifically looking for a director of color. And I thought of you immediately. So I read the script, and as soon as I read the script, I was immediately hooked.
Hmm.
And then it was, oh my gosh, how do I fight uh, to do a film for free, basically?
Right.
So yeah, that's how it all worked out. And because of the part, I knew that the actor either had to be a wonderful singer or we were going to just have him lip syncing to a track.
Mhm.
And fortunately, with Joseph David Jones, our star, he was an amazing singer. And it's interesting because I had to interview with him as well because he was one of the executive producers. And what I found initially with him was improvisationally, if that's a word, um, he didn't really appreciate wanting to go there. And
Huh.
the dialogue was very sparse throughout, but I knew that I needed him to improvise within a scene.
Mhm.
And he immediately says, "Wait, I'm just not that good at doing this. I'm really used to scripted lines." And I always like to, and this kind of goes with my style basically. I have a backstory for him, and that was something that he and I kind of worked on together, um, arriving at where I think he came from, the characters that he intersects with. And once we established a backstory, then you can start to, I think, talk about the intent of a scene. And I think that when you put the right folks together, and we had just this amazing Hispanic family, they had two boys, and the boys didn't really quite know what was going on. And I think that that added to the ambiguity of that scene. But the dialogue that he was able to improvise was absolutely perfect. And, it's one of those things, when you work with an actor and they're uncomfortable with that, then it becomes how do you make them uh, sort of comfortable with not only improvising, but just really being present in that scene. And I think that that's what you want out of all actors is just how can you be present in a scene and not act. So, there's that saying, so much of acting is reacting. And I think that for me, what I did with JoJo, uh, right off the bat with that scene, I did not allow the actors to speak to him in English for that particular scene with the
Oh,
Hispanic
that's
family.
interesting.
It was Spanish only, and they had to kind of figure out how to communicate. And we did several takes, some with dialogue and then some with just, not saying anything to each other, but reacting from what they're giving you based on body language and a look. So,
Mhm. Did you?
anyway.
That's interesting. Yeah. Did you rehearse prior to shooting a little bit, or walk through it, or block it, or you just kind of went and?
I am a cinematographer as well. I only shoot the things that I'm directing, and I'm an editor. So for me, I had to kind of walk the locations first. And as soon as I walked the location, I kind of had a pretty good idea on how that scene would be blocked. Um, we did a small blocking rehearsal with everyone. We were having, as anyone could probably attest to when you're doing an independent film, we were having some camera problems. You guys have probably never experienced that before.
Oh, always.
Uh, and so the camera issues put us behind by about 3 hours. And I think that tension added some depth to the scene because we were about to lose our location. We were shooting in a hotel in the San Fernando Valley, and it was an hourly hotel, if you know what I mean. And so it was really just about trying to be as efficient as possible. But we did a very small blocking. But I really wanted to start shooting because I can sense that the kids were getting uncomfortable, and I
Right.
didn't want their lives to be too impacted by our process. So,
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. The technical stuff. I mean, I feel like for our script it's highly scripted because it's stylized because
right,
it's a film noir. So there's like sometimes rat-a-tat dialogue, and there shouldn't be a lot of pause, so it's not naturalistic at all. So we rehearsed with our actors probably 2 weeks for 2 weeks prior on Zoom to get them used to working with the green screen because basically they are their own tech people. We would send them lights if they didn't have lights or they had lights, but how to set it up, making sure they're lit, making sure their sound is okay,
right,
making sure their hand isn't going out of the green screen because then that's
right,
gonna look weird. Like
right,
figuring out all the
And some of the
technical
settings
stuff.
that are on their computers, we had our the editor and tech person, go over everything with everybody, make sure everything was at least similar as well.
So that became, and then we would rehearse, and they wouldn't necessarily know their lines, but we would at least rehearse, and the actor doing the detective was voiceover, pretty much for the whole thing. So he'd be present for most of the shooting, and then when we got to did that 2 weeks of rehearsal, we're ready to shoot for. We were planning on maybe 8 days, or whatever it would take with Zoom, dividing up the parts and figuring out, trying to do everyone's scenes on one day, of course, or 2 days. But we had some issues with our actors with dialogue, which I'm sure you've had in the past, where an actor will think they know the part cold, and then when they start to perform it, they're starting to go up on their lines. And we were like, oh my God, I think they know it, but somehow the pressure of the moment or whatever, and we would have to stop and say, get some Post-its, put it on your computer, because we just have to keep the little camera up there free. So they just have the lines all over the place. And they were able to do it, which was great. But that was one of our most tense, I think, moments. Because they're
So,
good at their part, but you have to figure that out with them.
now I would imagine it's basically remote directing to some extent. So what
Yeah.
about the challenges of that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, it was. I mean, luckily we could see all the takes. We could like, or we could,
Yeah.
so we didn't have playback. We were just watching everything.
And we have an advantage because we worked with these people. Although you worked with the actor that you have in your film, but we've worked with these people for many years, so we can shorthand a lot of things, whatever we need, because we have a background in improvisation, and there are certain games and terms and things you can use to kind of evoke a,
Like
a
a
particular
mood.
kind of performance, and even know the kind of characters they do. You can say, "You remember that character you did that?
Mhm.
In that scene, we want that, and then they can do it." So we kind of had the advantage of actually rehearsing for 10, 20 years with a lot of these people,
Right.
so we don't have to do it on the fly as much, or we
But
could do it on the fly, I should say.
But what was interesting is sometimes we'd been working with them, and we would be like, oh, the scene feels flat. Like even though they're doing it right, they're doing it perfectly, and in the moment, which sounds like what you did with improv, is we would say to one actor in particular, you are really heartbroken. You love her, and this is your moment where you're just gonna like say it, and you're almost in tears. And he couldn't quite go there for a little bit, and then I'm like, you gotta, take a moment, like just take the moment, and you can have a moment, and you have to get it back together. And he did it finally, and that was like a brilliant take. But it's almost like he had to do a bunch, and we had to watch him do a bunch to know that we wanted that to be a little to land more.
And
Right.
also, sometimes we would have them. There were some moments that weren't working. We would have them improvise because we know that they can do it, and it would actually punch it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hearing you, and it goes back to a bit of an adage, the comfort in casting actors that you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Because you know their range, and like you said, you've seen characters that they were
Mm-hmm.
years back in the past, and you can draw from that experience of having a prior relationship with them.
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big advantage, I think.
Yeah, it is a big advantage. I mean, there are times where, I mean, we have done projects where we have had people come in and audition, and actually, they were great. I mean, so I guess we've had the you know the best of both worlds. But it is great to have the people you work with know what they can do and write for them, write for them for, and know that they can deliver on it.
Right.
Now, you also mentioned something just now about uh, a scene and your expectations of a scene, but being able to pivot. You go in with a preconceived notion of what you feel the scene should be, and then over time you watch take after take, and then it dawns on you and you say, wow, this is all wrong. it should be this.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that there's value in discussing that. I had an actor tell me before, he said, know your lines for sure, but don't commit to performing the scene in any way.
Mm.
Be malleable so that when you get there, you can pivot. And it sounds like you did a lot of takes with that one actor just to get to the one that you liked. And that's when you knew, okay, this is where he needs to be.
Right.
Yeah. But you're right. There are times where an actor can't do it, no matter how many times, or you're running out of time. So you have to figure out another way to convey something to move the story over. So you try another tact.
Mm-hmm.
We had
Yeah.
an actor in our film. She fell out for scheduling reasons, and she was meant to play a love interest to our main character. And I looked at her resume and said, wow, we'll be lucky to get her. And sure enough, scheduling took her out of the mix. So we found another woman who she didn't have the credits that the previous actor had, but she definitely had the physical looks for the character that we were hoping to portray. And I remember with her, what I relied upon most is her ability to flirt. She had done maybe more modeling than acting, and I knew that she could flirt. And that was a strength that I played towards, because I felt that directing her from a traditional actor-director relationship might not work. But if I can have her, if I could speak in photography terms, fashion photography, what could that be like? And it worked for one scene. But then, like you guys are talking about, we had another scene where she had to be emotional. And getting her to that point proved to be a little difficult. But one of the things that I think helps in situations like this, and you might not have had the same ability to do this, but in my blocking, we're shooting on a location, and I could have the crowd around her start to hiss and boo a little, which was dialogue that we would never hear, all meant to kind of make her feel bad and kind of talk bad about the character who was there, and this and that. And I found that when she started hearing these things that were being given to her from the people around her, our background cast, all of a sudden she started reacting to them in a way that it wasn't quite the emotion, the over the top crying and upset that I was looking for, but you can see that it was visibly bothering her. Bothering her in a way that was very real. And as she started to look around and pay attention to them, that's when the magic started happening. And you find those moments as a director, I think. And when you see those moments, you go, whoa, okay, this is exactly what I was looking for. And sometimes you mine a little bit more for it. But like you were saying just now, Dan, you said that when you have it, and when you have it, it's time to move on.
Yeah, but I do like that it is like you said, if you can find it, if it may not necessarily be what you want, but if it's real or and believable, that's great. If you get the audience to believe that person is going through whatever it is, you can just jettison what your original idea might have been.
It's sometimes hard because you've got such an idea of what the scene should look like, the tone of it, where it gets more emotional, where it's just more deadpan, and then if the actor can't get there, or for some reason you're not directing them to get there, I also have found myself having to give up my notion of what I really wanted a lot, and just trust that the actor is bringing a lot to it, and they're bringing a slightly different take, but it's totally workable. I mean, I had I don't know what idea I had for one of the woman in the art gallery,
Yes.
and it was because we would read the script to each other, just before we had them read it, just to see how it flowed, and we would do all the characters. So you're kind of getting into,
You have a certain take
like,
on the
I'm going to
character.
do the character should be like that, and she brought a totally different thing to it, but it worked. It was just, it was, you kind of have to give up what you want and see what they're going to bring to it. So
I think that, you guys as writers look at things a little differently than I do, obviously. Uh, I've heard a very famous director say that the script is written 3 times. The first time that the writer writes it, the second time once you're shooting and the actors are performing it, and then the third time once you start cutting. And I do feel that as writers, you guys are a lot more attached to the characters, um, to what they should sound like.
mhm.
I think that there's always an intention to a scene, but that's the beauty, I think, of casting the right actors is that they'll look at the words and they'll give you something, their interpretation of it, and it may not necessarily be what you want, but the good directors, I think, are smart enough to see, huh,
Mhm.
I hadn't thought of that, but this is actually pretty cool.
Right, right.
They brought a depth to this character. And oftentimes when in television, you do something called a tone meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually with the writer. And you go through every single scene and, you hear about intention, obstacle. You can even hear, okay, 2 episodes from now, the mother of this guy is going to die. So that's why this is written this way. They might want to play it a little differently, but you have to kind of bring them back here because we know something that they don't. But what I find is that the actors always bring something, the good actors always bring something very, very different that you
Mm-hmm.
weren't expecting. And the best directors, I think, are the ones that are smart enough to just be quiet and allow that to happen. And sure, if you want to kind of pivot, prod a little bit more, that's absolutely fine. But the best directors are the ones who kind of sit back and go, okay, yeah, we got it.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you guys, since we're on a panel,
Yeah.
give me some of your tricks to working with director or working with actors.
Uh, I think, well, again,
Rehearsal.
yeah, rehearsal.
Rehearsal, rehearsal. I love
I think
rehearsal.
I think that's, if you can, like, I've read enough of directors like that I've admired who have and even some actors who've actually insisted, of course it depends on the project, but if they can, to try to get some rehearsal in
Mm-hmm.
so that you can do some discovery with the actors, and they even say it saves a lot of time and money if they can even do like a week or a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as an actor, have experienced it a few times where I would go in before the shooting and rehearse with the actor that, a scene or two before with the director, and I think it's very helpful. So that you can discuss, play around with. I think I don't know if that's a trick or a tip, but I think it's a great idea if it can be done, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and of course, like you were saying, also casting is a huge percentage of it. And if you do cast the right person, you don't really have to do that much, just tweak them or say, do it a little faster, or, make sure you're not walking out of the light. But you don't have to tell them too much about the acting.
I
Now
mean,
that
other tricks. I mean, not tricks, but things. Um, if you know your actors, which we do, like Dan said, you can tell them that character, or even having a similar reference level of like, um, okay, it's kind of like it's young Frankenstein. It's very deadpan. To give them the
A
style, the
reference, yeah,
style
a
of it.
reference.
A little bit Doctor Strangelove. So everything is done very seriously, but sometimes you're saying something ridiculous, and that'll work.
And
Yeah.
as writers, we sometimes will go to the actor for a line and tell them what the thought beneath the line, almost like the subtext,
Yeah.
what the thinking process is in order for them to understand what we want, especially if you're the writer. But I suspect that even as a director, you're analyzing the script and you're going, what's going on underneath? What are they not saying? And see if the actor is on board with it. Saying, what they're really thinking here, even though they're asking for their coat back, is they want a date or something like that. Because sometimes the actor will go, oh, gee, I didn't even think of it that way.
Right, right. That subtext is oftentimes left ambiguous, but if you explain it to them, it kind of seems to really register and hit a little bit harder.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, what are you trying to do? You're saying this, but what is it you're trying to do at this moment? What do you want to do? Or what do you want to accomplish?
What we also did with a lot of our actors is we would have them do, like, let's say 5 takes, 4 takes. Sometimes it was a lot.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of technical weirdness with, like, our technical director would be like, you froze, like we're dealing with all of that. You froze, your audio dropped out. It went, so we had to keep starting again. And then at the end of it, when we were happy with 1 or 2 takes,
got the take we
fun
want.
take, do a fun take, like just go for it. And that was sometimes the best take.
A lot of times that was the best take. Yeah, because now they were really relaxed and they don't have to worry because I said, you already got it, so do whatever you want. And sometimes they bring more to it than even they realize.
It's actually something that's super important, and it can be used as a trick as well when you're working with an actor. I've heard of directors, I've not done this myself yet, who, when they feel like they have an acceptable take in the can, they'll say, hey, so I think I got exactly what I needed. Now I want you guys, you just do one for you, however you want to do it. And like you were saying, oftentimes that leads to the best one, but sometimes that is not just the best one, but that's the one that the director is seeking, but they just have not exhausted the parameters of, what can be done in terms of good direction, but just really throwing it to them and, allowing them to be free without direction to create and craft the scene and the performance how they want to. And like you said, that leads to magic.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's important that, and is trying to, I think, is trying to make it so that the actor feels as comfortable and not as self-conscious as possible. I even saw one time, I was working on a film and the director wanted a certain kind of reaction, and this was a sort of a background player that was reacting, and he had the camera rolling, but he talked to the actor going, why, what, and he would just be talking about the actor while the actor was looking at him. And of course the actor didn't realize that they weren't being filmed. He thought that he was just talking to him about his costume or whatever he's in, but really what he was doing was making the actor not self-conscious about being on camera.
And to your point, there was a movie, Cameron Crowe, Aloha, starring Bradley Cooper, Emma Stone. He did that same thing. There was a real person. He played the character of Bumpy in the film, and he was a Hawaiian guy. I think he was a cultural advisor on the film, but Cameron liked him so much that he actually created a role for him. And to get the performance out of him that he wanted, he just would have Bradley Cooper talking to him and asking him questions while they were rolling.
That's great. Yeah.
Right. So they used, I don't know, quite a few bits and pieces of dialogue, but when they cut that into the actual scene itself, it takes the edge of amateurism off of the performance. And I think it gets the actor comfortable, or in this case, the non-actor comfortable filming with a film crew around him, because he's used to sort of talking and becomes unaware of the process of filmmaking.
Yeah, that's true.
The first time I shadowed a director on an episodic show, who's an actor director, a guy named Gregory Smith, who's only done, actually, he's done some features and some television acting. But I was very curious to see his approach to directing from an actor standpoint. And one of the things that Gregory told me is actors don't want to hear too much from a director.
Mhm.
When you note them, for one, let them get a couple takes in before you give them a note. And when you do give them a note, verbs are something that they respond to. You know,
Right.
don't be sort of vague with it. Give them an actionable verb. And he gave me this really cool app that I don't have any affiliation with this app, by the way, but it's called Actions, the Actors Thesaurus.
Oh wow.
And it's a pretty cool app. And what I found is that it really does work when you can give an actor 2 or 3 words. You go
Mhm.
in, um, let's take this from them,
Right.
you know, or I think you gotta barrage them with info
Mhm.
here. Um,
Yeah.
they immediately get it,
Right.
and you leave and you're back in your chair. Okay, let's go ahead and roll, and your first AD kind of gets you going again. But what I learned from Gregory is be communicative, but you don't have to do so with so many words.
Hmm.
They don't need to hear that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
1 or 2 words, 3, and then leave and let them process and come to it. And I think that sometimes, like, I've watched directors who sit and, they have this monologue about, oh, I was looking for this, and I think you should be more this. And, you leave, and the actor's just sort of left with, oh my gosh, does that mean that everything else I've done is crap? And
Hmm.
that's the other thing that, I'm not sure your style, but I always do this. I always go in and I say, that was great. That's
Yes.
Let me use that as option one. You want to try this one and see? And it really is about involving them and allowing them to author the piece.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm. Yes, it is. That's what we do too. Is like we caution each other about don't give them actors too much to think about
Hmm.
because they're not in the scene. But if you can whittle it down to the essence of what that moment, like you're saying, you want this person to get pissed off,
Hmm.
piss them off. Just give them a particular focus
Hmm.
or a particular goal
Hmm.
uh, to accomplish. I even remember Deb and I got to see Sidney Pollack talk,
Hmm.
and he said that there was a scene where a person had to pack a suitcase, but it was kind of boring. He wanted to see, so he gave the person doing the scene a bunch of numbers, and he said during the scene, add up these numbers, and I want the total by the end of it. And then you see like this person, is concentrating while they're doing it. It looked like something was going on, all he was doing was adding numbers.
That's a classic thing
Yeah.
too. This old like a silent in silent movies. One other thing is when you have a close up and you want to see the person thinking. Think about if you shut the oven off, or did you leave a burner on? Did you leave
Yeah.
something on? Is there fire in your house? And if you do that, there's concern. There's something going across your face, and the audience fills in the rest.
Something analogous to what you want, but that the actor can connect with, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those are great points. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the beauty of talking to other filmmakers and directors is that you can steal stuff. And,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
you guys were fortunate enough to listen to Sidney Pollack, and he imparted that knowledge on you. And of course,
Yeah.
now I will steal that and take
Do
that
Yes.
into
it. Do
my
it.
Great.
next
Great.
project.
Right.
But
Um,
yeah,
it is funny. Yeah, I was also thinking back when you were talking about keeping the camera rolling. There's also a really great at Dr. Strangelove Kubrick. Remember the performance of
Oh, George C.
George
Scott.
C. Scott, the over
Yeah.
the top performance that's in the movie. What's the story? He didn't.
Well, the story there is that he goes, I want you to, he would, or George C. Scott would do a bunch of takes, playing a general in there. And he goes, I want you just to go crazy, just go over the top. Give me one, just to loosen up. And that was the performance that he cut in. And apparently, at first, George C. Scott did not like that. He thought it was too over the top. But most critics who saw it thought he stole the film.
Right.
And even subsequently, as years gone by, Scott appreciated the performance more.
It's interesting because actors don't necessarily, well, they don't know what they're looking like on film. The
Yeah.
director and the DP know what's going on. And an actor will kind of get in their brain to self-direct a little and will kind of go, that's too big, or I want it, and you have to keep them from not thinking about themselves. So I love what you said about an active direction. Something.
Yes, absolutely. I was working, here's another tidbit, and these are all, I think, great tidbits that whoever watches this, filmmakers, directors, actors, even, um, I was doing a television show earlier this year, and the actor, um, Meg Gibson, very talented actor. She's been working in this business forever. She asked me, Lionel, where am I coming from? And I said, oh, well, you've just come from the lobby there. And she goes, okay, I just wanted to know how I arrived here and where am I going? And I said, well, you're going to exit, right there where it says exit. You're going to kind of walk out with you and your cousins. Later on, the lead actor comes over and he tells me, he says, Lionel, you have to know these things. She's a seasoned actor. When she asks you where she's coming from, yes, it can be the physical, which is what you described to her, but where is she coming from emotionally?
Mm-hmm.
Where was she at before she got the news to arrive here? And where is she going to go to now that she has this news?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, every actor needs to know, where are they coming from? How did they arrive here at this scene?
Mm-hmm.
And when the scene ends, where are they going?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that. It's like every day you learn stuff, I think, as a director or an actor, anybody in this business, if you keep your mind open to it. When I thought about that, it's like, oh my God, how did I miss that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was so important of a tool for me that I just sort of kept that in my toolkit. And I think that all of the young filmmakers these days probably, they say, okay, I'm going to shoot this scene right here. And I'm going to put the camera here and the actors are going to be here and it's going to look great. The bridge in the background, streetcars going by, yada, yada, yada. But how did they get there?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't something that I thought about a ton until that moment there. And that's something that I keep in my toolkit with me right now. And I see this oftentimes on television shows, including a show that I'm about to go and do, where I just see actors sort of, they pick them up and they're kind of coming down some steps and headed to their office. But it's like, where are you coming from?
Right.
What would be in your hands,
Mm-hmm.
and where are you going after this scene that's going to, once your dialogue ends, what are you going to do then? Are you just going to stop talking and wait for the director to call cut?
Right.
And this actor, Scott Bakula, I would watch him and he would grab okay, I'm going to need my car keys. Let me get my briefcase and I need a stack of mail. And that's him arriving at work thinking to himself, where did I just come from?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it informs so much of his character. And if you give this to actors, then they start to feel empowered,
Yeah.
And for Scott, he just, so then I started kind of guessing for him, like, all right, Scott, you should probably have coffee if you're coming to work here and it's bright outside, so your sunglasses would be on and you should have your briefcase with you. And he goes, I know I'm already thinking way ahead of you, but these are things that help, I think, inform the scene to a great deal. And it's oftentimes what is ignored with directors.
Yeah, I see that a lot too, and some newer stuff. Yeah. And you kind of yeah, everyone is to make them a fully realized person and to be present, something happened. If it was the cat, they forgot to change the cat litter. I mean, there's something in their brain that will actually help ground them in the scene.
We even do there. A lot of the techniques we use sometimes are, which is improvisation, is Viola Spolin, who was the grande dame of improvisation and created a book called Improvisation for Theater. And she has a lot of games that and techniques that actors can use and directors can use too, to to use either for improvisation or to help to create to do scripted stuff work as well. But one of the games she plays is where an actor, without any words, a player, she calls them players, will enter, come onto the space and then leave, and then we, the audience, have to guess where they're coming from,
Where they're going.
why they're there, and where they're going. So even she knew that was what's required of a person, a player.
Right.
Now, what is this person's name again? I always like to read
Sure.
that.
Viola Spolin, and
Viola.
her book is called
Spolin.
yes, Spolin. It's called Improvisation for the Theater.
But she also wrote a book on improvisation for directors, I believe, and the lone actor.
Yeah, the lone
Actors to
actor.
work alone.
But a lot of her stuff came out of how to work. And her son, of course, Paul Sills, who was the director who created The Second City, and was the one who developed story theater and so forth. He used a lot of these games when he directed plays, or a lot of these techniques.
What we were talking about, when you said giving the actor a focus, like how Cindy Pollock make them count, add up numbers.
Yeah.
A lot of these games give actors a focus, so they don't think about what they're
not worried about performing.
storytelling.
Yeah, they're not performing.
So if you keep one of them is I guess one of them is what, speak to touch or something.
Touch to speak.
Touch to speak. So you always
or
have
contact.
contact. Yeah.
Well, you could only speak by touching something, or there's whisper, where you can only talk with whisper.
Right.
And sometimes it heightens things because you're whispering for a purpose, and it gives something. You might even do, like if you may have a scene, we go, let's try whispering this scene,
Right.
and it might give it a life that you were looking for.
So and all the games are just to make an improviser or an actor very present, like what you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Make them in the scene, in the space, and if you're in the moment, even though you haven't memorized your lines, you should know your lines just like by rote. It'll seem spontaneous.
It seemed like you're just saying it for the first time. Yeah.
These are absolutely amazing tidbits, and it's whoever watches is lucky enough to watch this stuff and listen to it, I think will learn a great deal about
I think
what
so,
what we go through. Now, let me ask you a question. I myself have taken an acting class with a woman named Judith Weston. She used to teach classes for the DGA and has a great book called Directing for Actors. I've taken some improv classes. Are these things that you guys have done? How valuable of a tool do you think they are for the filmmaker? I can give my response to this, but I'm throwing it out to you guys.
I mean, it's really been it's been our school. I mean, we've been doing this for more than 30 years, primarily using. I mean, I have taken scene study classes, and Deb has too, but and some other traditional classes, especially in theater. But improvisation has informed our writing, acting, and directing. We run a workshop with actors, and we're always working on games and so forth to help the actor to play, or as I said, we call them player, to not be so self-conscious about being on stage and doing a performance, but just behaving, just being, as uh, what it was a quote we just saw about again Paul Sills, the director who is the son of Viola Spolin. He says, "Don't pretend to be human, be one." You know, that was his philosophy.
Right.
I think that puts it in a nutshell. But we've used improvisation for writing by putting a scene up on its feet and then seeing how it's played out. We've used it for directing by giving actors focuses from using these games. And I've used them myself as an actor. And sometimes a director will ask me to do something and I will reinterpret it with, they'll go, oh, what they're asking me to do is contact or whatever. And they'll like what I did and I go, aha, I interpreted it exactly.
It's kind of a whole language of how to be just more present and grounded.
Yeah.
The games. And I also think it helps actors as well because like from going in on auditions, you know, they'll suddenly ask you to do it totally, you know, you've rehearsed it this one way, you think this is the way to do it, and they're like, do it this way, and you're flexible. You can take direction a lot easier, I think, without overthinking it.
Yeah.
You just, yeah, okay, I'll do it this way. So there's a kind of a freedom, I think, that improv gives. I would definitely recommend improv.
I would definitely recommend taking improv.
But there are some improv classes that are, I mean, I think doing the basic games are where to go. There's some classes that focus more on doing really broad characters, and that's not really what you want. You want to learn the basic.
Yeah, I would say if
games,
you get the basics, but even taking a class, even just getting that experience, even though it's more comedy oriented, of just being up there and
in your body.
in your body and you know comfortable with that kind of it, just the experience of it, saying things for the first time. You now have that experience and you can translate that to when you learn, you know, dialogue and so forth. You get that same feeling.
What was
It's
your
very
feeling in the
it's
class?
very interesting. I agree with you 100%, and I don't think a lot of directors think about that. But when you find yourself on the other end of this and you're having to perform, you talked about being present and in your body. That's probably the most difficult part of doing this. And what I think is that classes such as these give you an appreciation, number one. Number two, it lets you learn how to talk with actors. And I don't want to say there's a science to that, but it's there's a process to it. And the very first scene I did was with a woman who was very, very good. I think that she was there as sort of like the ringer in the class. She had played Paul Newman's wife in a film called Slapshot. And my first scene was with her. And before we did the scene, she was getting all these props out of the closet and kind of setting things up. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what the hell is she doing? We're just supposed to read this scene. You know, I think I got my lines. And watching her do this and having the teacher stop me and say, okay, you're acting. I was like, of course I'm acting. That's what I'm supposed to be doing, is acting.
Yeah.
Stop, you're acting. But, you know, midway through the class, you start to understand and get it. But I don't think that enough filmmakers take the time to do this. And I do think that that shows in the scripts that we see and the films that are being made, and certainly the performances. And I wanted to check this with you two, because it sounds like you guys have had a lot of practice in what you do and crafting this. And I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think it as much as, like they say, you know, as a filmmaker, it's a good idea to know all of the jobs, you know, and that includes acting, you know, as well as knowing camera lenses and knowing lighting and sound and all that, is also to experience what it is to be on stage in front of, you know, people, other people.
Yeah. Now, one last thing that I want to just throw out there, because I don't want to go on for too much longer, is for the young filmmaker, for the young director, do you ever stop learning? Or is this, I know for me, like you saw me just writing down the name of this book by the author that you mentioned. I find that I just can't seem to learn enough. I want to know more and more, once again, about how can I talk to an actor and get them to go somewhere that maybe they weren't thinking about, and maybe the writer wasn't thinking about it. Um, Talk about the evolution of just continuing to learn and absorb.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're big like director fans. So we'll read Billy Wilder's biography, Neil Simon's biography. Any there was a great series of documentaries about Billy Wilder. That's just it's just amazing. I think he did it in German and it's translated, right? But it's just
Oh, you mean
great.
there was a documentary that was done by
Yeah,
a German company,
it's wonderful.
but
And
it,
there's
but
and
he
it's
does speak English, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
and but
But what I was saying is like we just you're still students of entertainment. I mean, in all aspects, like actors will just, and I'll even be. I was in graduate school, getting an MFA, and I was doing a project dealing with Marlon Brando, and I would just watch his films, and of course, Elia Kazan's the director, but Brando when he puts the glove on while he's talking to Eva Marie Saint, while he's just doing his line. I mean, that's his business that he created, and it's sensual. It's got this great subtext. It's brilliant, and you're just like that scene is riveting. I mean, you're still like studying everything to pick up a tidbit, you know.
and we've been doing this for a while. It's especially writing and improvisation, and we always find that there's way more to learn.
Hmm.
I'm still learning stuff, and that's if you get I can't remember. I think it was an artist or somebody who had been drawing. He goes, uh, but some artist saying, I've drawn for uh, something like 40 years and I'm now just beginning to learn learn what drawing is.
You learn with each
You
project
know,
for sure. Yeah.
I completely agree. Without dating myself, back in the day when they used to make DVDs of movies, I don't know if they still do that or not.
We know
They
they
would.
make VHSs of movies, okay? So we're dating. You're young.
go back to 8 millimeter.
Uh, they had movies, and I would always buy these movies, the special edition ones that would have the director commentary.
Yeah, those
I
are great.
absolutely love those, and I still watch these to this day. I know the Directors Guild has a collection of interviews with a variety of directors. These are just, I think, great resources for any filmmaker to go and watch some of these. Like you said, hearing Sidney Pollack, who's not with us anymore, just to get inside of his brain, who is just one of the
Mhm.
masters, right? Um, David Fincher, anybody that you can think of, I think uh, picking their brain by watching these videos or commentaries to me is super valuable. So
Yeah, the TV Academy also has a lot of interviews with actors, directors,
Oh
creators
yeah,
of
yeah.
content. Yeah, but yeah, that's great. This was a great
There was also
conversation. But
there was a book by Cameron Crowe. You're speaking about
oh
Cameron
right,
Crowe, where he interviewed Billy Wilder and
yeah,
asked him a lot of questions.
yeah.
That's a pretty great book.